I started KyngPin Creations earlier this year, and since then I've taken my digital painting and illustration further than I ever previously have. Not only focusing on digital art and long-form content, but also doing daily doodles as warm-ups on the Shorts page for a little over a month now. And today, 3 or 4-ish months after the creation of this channel, I want to take all the different lessons I've learned from the previous videos and fuse them into one art piece, while also fusing some of my favorite pop culture characters, which will hopefully be my best piece to date. Let's get started. Anger and grief are a dangerous combination that could lead the person down a road of irrational decisions and, God forbid, drag others along with them. Billy Blaze's father was killed when Billy was just a teenager. The killer was efficient, and he was able to get away with it without leaving any evidence for the police to trace. The only thing they had to go off of was Billy and his photographic memory, as he saw the killer's face, but with little else, it could only do so much. After months of zero leads and the case pretty much going cold, Billy decided to take matters into his own hands. While Billy didn't have much physical prowess, he did possess an unwavering hunger for justice. Billy finished up his high school studies with top marks, leading him to get into the West Craven College, where he enrolled to get a degree in engineering. It was that college where he also met Stu Castles, another brilliant student who specialized in programming and robotics. Once at college, Billy sped through the course materials and began constructing a suit of armor that he could use to take out his father's killer. He worked tirelessly for months in between classes, and eventually, the first prototype was ready to be tested. Billy was able to build a full bodysuit of robotic armor, equipped with an LED screen mask that could be used to show different facial expressions, a voice modulator to disguise his voice, and a pair of sharp, retractable wings, which, admittedly, were just for show at the moment. Billy went out one night to test the suit, hoping to find some kind of small trouble people were getting into. As luck would so have it, he happened to run into a few students spray painting the side of a building. He stood behind him, trying his best to sound authoritative and intimidating. In reality, though, the spray painters just laughed at him. Billy stepped and tried to take a swing at the head spray painter, but the suit of armor was weighing him down, and he was able to easily dodge and counteract Billy's attack. Soon, Billy was on the ground, surrounded by the delinquents who were all kicking him. Despite being covered in his armor, it did very little to protect him from the blows. When they had had their fun, the group left Billy on the floor and went to spray paint another building. Billy lay there for a few minutes, sulking in the humiliation. Eventually, he pulled himself up and dragged himself back to his dorm. The next day in class, Stu noticed the bruises and asked Billy about them. Caught off guard, Billy couldn't come up with an excuse, and as a result, told Stu everything about how his father was killed years ago, how the police were unable to catch the culprit, and how he's been on a mission of revenge ever since. When pressed on about the bruises themselves, Billy embarrassingly recounted the events of the night prior. When he was done, Stu's face lit up, much to Billy's confusion. But he listened to the kid. Stu proposed to him that instead of Billy piloting the suit, they programmed the suit to move and act on its own to eliminate the risk of getting hurt. Not wanting a repeat of the previous night, Billy agreed to let Stu help him. After class, the two headed back to Billy's dorm where he showed Stu the battle-damaged suit. Even after only a glance, Stu knew Billy's suit had a ton of potential. It just needed a few repairs. Over the course of the next few weeks, Billy and Stu spent all their free time back in Billy's dorm working on the suit-turned-robot, with Billy taking care of the repairs and Stu working on the programming and machine learning. When everything was ready to go, the two boys took a step back to take in what they had done. Stu took a step forward and inserted the coding into the suit. For a minute, nothing happened. The machine was hunched over and motionless as if it was still waiting for a pilot to enter its shell. Then, the LED screen lit up a bright yellow before all the different parts of the machine moved, as it pulled itself upright and turned to scan its surroundings. When it was done scanning, the machine slowly marched over to the window, threw it open, and stepped out onto the ledge. It sprouted its wings, but before Billy had time to protest, it launched itself forward before, immediately falling and slamming into the ground. Although Billy was focused on repairing the damages of the suit, he still wasn't able to get the wings up and working as they intended. Now all their hard work lay in a pile of scraps on the ground several stories below them. It was back to the drawing board, but first they had to pick up the pieces. Literally. Back in their room again, Billy and Stu sat and just stared at the pile of scraps that was once a sentient, albeit not too brilliant, machine. There was a small silver lining though. While picking everything up, Stu discovered that the motherboard with its programming survived the fall, meaning once Billy rebuilt the machine, with working wings this time, they'd be ready to re-upload Stu's programming into it. Stu got up and left Billy to get to rebuilding, but Billy couldn't bring himself to do it. He had spent so many years being driven by avenging his father against a man he didn't even know was still alive, only for him to hit wall after wall. Billy picked up and looked at the main face screen of the machine before throwing it against the wall, knocking a couple of books off his shelf. Billy let out a deep sigh as he went to pick them up, when one of the books caught his attention. It was a book on religions and other worldly deities. Suddenly, he had an idea. Not a bright idea, but an idea nonetheless. What if he made a deal with the devil to avenge his father, but offered up the machine instead of himself? After all, people made deals with demons all the time in movies, and some of those times they found a way to survive them. Billy figured he'd be one of those times. Billy left his room immediately and went down to the local toy store to pick up a Ouija board. He returned and set everything up for the seance, drawing the curtains, lighting candles, and placing the robot's head in the center of the room. He began using the board, asking the devil to help him avenge his father in exchange for the offering he placed before him. The board began shaking violently, and the candle flames flickered. Suddenly, a large pillar of flames erupted from the board, and when it died down, Billy's machine stood before him, completely repaired. He looked down at his feet and saw the motherboard with Stu's code, the final piece of the puzzle. Billy picked it up and tentatively made his way to the back of the robot to insert the component. The robot jolted awake, its face booted up, displaying a ghoulish face with exaggerated facial features and shining directly onto Billy. But the glow was way too bright to be coming from the LED screen alone. It took him a moment to realize that the robot's head was fully engulfed in flames. Billy went into a panic. Something must have short-circuited in the robot's head, and Stu's motherboard was probably being damaged. Billy ran around his room trying to remember where he put the fire extinguisher, before remembering that he had dismantled it and put it into the robot when it was still intended to be a suit, as a safety precaution. He approached the machine, hoping that he could manually activate the fire extinguisher and put out the flames, but when he tried to touch it, the robot grabbed Billy's wrist and flipped him over. It stood over Billy, who was on the floor, and its display changed from a ghoulish face to a phrase that read, "Insert command." Billy was still recovering from getting the wind knocked out of him, so he was only able to get out the word, "vengeance." The screen returned to the ghost face from before. It walked over to the bed and threw a blanket around itself. Immediately, the blanket burst into flames before transforming into a slick leather trench coat with spiked shoulder pads. Once again, the robot sprouted two sleek wings and shot up through the roof of Billy's dorm, leaving Billy awestruck. He couldn't believe it. The wings actually worked this time. From that day forward, the two boys never saw the robot again. A few weeks later, Billy had heard on the news that his father's killer was found petrified with a glazed look in his eyes, but after that, nothing. However, there have been many tales from people in the surrounding area, claiming that they had either been saved or seen a glowing winged figure in a trench coat. Was it an angel? A devil? No one knew, but people who had seen it stood by their story. The prompt of this design challenge was to take 3 or 4 pop culture characters and combine them all into one design. And going into this, I really only had the idea for 2 characters. I had the idea to combine Ghostface from Scream and Ghost Rider from Marvel. Mostly because Scream is one of my favorite horror movies, but also just because of that ghost connection, Ghostface, Ghost Rider. And I had the idea to make the Ghostface mask engulfed in flames and then turned Ghostface's cloak into something made out of leather instead, kind of turning into a leather trench coat while also keeping the baggy sleeves to show that it's a cloak slash trench coat kind of thing, and then also have the spikes on the end to throw in a little more Ghost Rider spice. And originally I wanted the third character to be Ghost Freak from Ben 10 to get that Ghost trifecta, but I had already used Ghost Freak when I turned Ben 10 aliens into high schoolers in a recent video, and I just wasn't feeling the design elements of Ghost Freak or even Siscare I tried it out with, which was okay, but not great. And I knew I had to choose a character with more external parts to it. That is to say, something a little more than just head, chest, 4 limbs. And since I recently watched Murder Drones, N was on my mind, and so I decided to use him, which worked out really well because it had the wings. And I loved the design of the wings, and I wanted to incorporate that into the design, and it just kind of snowballed from there, wound up turning the exposed skin, meaning like the back of the head, the hands, and the feet, turning that from fleshy tones to settling on a metallic gray to show like it's basically a robot suit, which worked well into the story of it was a robot that was originally meant to be an Iron Man-esque suit. And the rendering overall I loved so much because there were so many different harsh light sources that all would have cast lights on all the different materials in their own unique way, and it required a different sense of rendering than everything. The leather coat, the metal wings and the metal hands, the fabric-like hood that he's wearing, the LED screen, the pan, all of it just reacted in different ways, and I had to use different techniques of shadowing and highlights to make sure that material came across and it didn't just look like one whole thing. And I think that turned out really well. On the other hand, I think if going forward, something I would like to work on a lot more is dynamic posing, because ever since that video last week where I drew that really lively animated pose of the golden lion, I really want to do more dynamic poses like that. And this one's very good. The legs and most of it works out, but I feel like the upper body itself, specifically in the chest and the back arm, could be tilted back more for an arm that's following through with throwing an object. It's very dead on when if you're following through with something, your chest would definitely be angled backwards a lot more than I drew it. So definitely want to try that out. But overall, I love how this piece turned out. Took me a little longer than normal, but I think it was worth every second. Let's check it out. Now, you might think that this is the end of the video, and on a normal basis, you would be right. I fulfilled the design challenge, we went through the story and the design notes, and I showed you the final product. But if you look down here, you'll see that the YouTube play bar still has a big chunk of gray left. And that's because when I had finished this, there were a couple hours left before the deadline. So I had the brilliant idea of, what if I animated it? So I went back into Photoshop, made a copy of the working file in case anything went wrong, and individually started saving each individual piece of the character, which took a little bit of drawing because when, let's say, like the main body was gone, there was nothing for the end of the wings. So I had to paint in a couple extra details on all the different parts that were overlapped by something else in order to make sure that when I moved them in the animation, you didn't see empty space. Then I brought everything into After Effects, which, because they were all saved from the same file, everything was already lined up perfectly, so I was able to just go in and start moving things around. I wanted it to be subtle, so I made the wings move up and down and the body to move along with it, and then also had the knife slowly coming closer to the camera. It looked really good, and I also wound up making it a looping animation so you can just watch it over, because it only ended up being like 5 seconds, so like I made it loop, and it's a perfect loop too, which I'm so happy about. My only thing is, I wish that instead of, for the loop, having him come at the camera and fade out while the next one comes in, I wish instead I had brought him up from the bottom, had the wings flap a little bit, and then have him shoot up as the next one came in from the bottom to loop the thing. I think it would have worked a little bit more, considering the character was flying, but it still looks very cool as it is. That was just a little extra bit, and I was so glad I was able to do that before the deadline. And let's take a look at the final animated product. I was set to make my best art piece to date, and I think I did it. I think I would be comfortable showcasing this to somebody who asked me where my art style was at as of September 9th, 2023 at 11:30 a.m. That's when I'm recording this. And if you had fun for this video, feel free to text your vote to 111112, or you could just simply hit the like button. And if you want to know what kind of music I was listening to this beast of a project, there will be a link in the description down below to a Spotify playlist of everything I listened to for the entire 15 to 17 hours. Thank you all so much. If you want to check out more, there's more digital painting to the side of me. But that's all I got for you today. I'm KyngPin Creations, and I'll see you all next week. Take care, everybody.